And welcome. It is so nice to have you with us right here on Biz Talk Radio. And so the question comes up every once in a while, and you hear about it. It was just on the news last week. 4-day work weeks. Yes. And for many, I personally feel that if you can get your job done in 4 days, then go for it. Then just go for it. But is it that simple? MBA George Nagle is with us today. And George, welcome back. So you are, of course, the founder of the Ideation Emporium of creativity. Not easy to say. How do you feel about it, George? How do you feel about a 4-day week?
So, Frankie, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be able to speak with you. But, a 4-day week, I feel really encouraged that we're seeing this actually starting to become more and more talked about and a little bit more mainstream. And Frankie, the main reason for that is we actually become more productive when we have less idle time, and we cut out some of the stuff that doesn't really make sense and is just noise.
Yes.
And we're actually more productive to the point where we actually see productivity increase 40%.
When I worked at one of the major publications in the city of Boston decades ago, way back when, there was a rule. And the rule was that you could not, I'm not kidding, you could not, once you sat down and got situated in the morning, that was it. You could not get up and down and up and down and up and down, because the director of marketing and sales shared with us that we were wasting hours at the end of the week. And he documented that, we were in a gorgeous building that was a former horticultural center in Boston. And so the ceilings were open and it had a lot of echoes going on. But we were in the strange configuration. But, we were very social, and the office was so beautiful, and people were always coming in and out, and it was fun it was a fun in place. And he was absolutely right, though. The more that we got up, the interactions were happening, and we lost a lot of productivity. And there was a tremendous amount of pressure to fill a magazine every month. It was not, an easy thing to do. Each one was responsible for pages and pages of advertising, 10 to 15 pages a person. It's a lot of advertising. So you couldn't waste a lot of time. You were forced to sit and really dial for dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
yeah,
I don't think that was, my opinion, that was not the way to go about it, because it really stopped you from being a creative human being, because we are social. But the point, though, is that we do waste a lot of time.
So we waste a lot of time because we have time to fill. So the notion of 9 to 5 is extraordinarily arbitrary. That was kind of picked just at random on how they said it, and the world just adopted it and went with it. The concept at play here, there's two. There's Pareto's principle, which is basically the 80-20 rule, and then you have something called Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that given too much time, we will make something more important than it is, and we'll fill it with nonsense. And that's kind of what you're describing, right? You guys had all this pressure and you had to get all of these things done, and that's true. But if you had only had 3 days to do it, you would have figured out a way to do it in 3 days.
That's right.
And you would have gotten it done. So there's a lot that can go into that, because we're only about 20% of our time produces about 80% of our productivity.
So do you think California will pass this 32-hour work week?
I think that there is some strong evidence and case studies to support it. We are in the midst of a midterm election year, so all bets are off on the table on what they're going to do or not do. But the fact that it's being talked about in a more mainstream and from a governmental standpoint is an indication that the tides are starting to turn to move that way. And when we look at more progressive companies, they're already doing very similar things. This isn't just based in California deciding that they just want to randomly do something. That's absolutely not the case. There are already many documented cases of going to a 4-day work week, even if it's 10 hours a day, increasing productivity, or 32 hours, increasing productivity across this country and in multiple other countries.
So what companies are successful? I know that there are many now with this hybrid model that many companies are saying, no, don't come back into the office. Many are saying, you know what, let's see if you can do half and half. And so talk to us a little bit about what has been successful and what countries and what models have been very successful.
Yeah, so even pre-pandemic, Microsoft in Japan determined that they wanted to achieve a greater balance in work and social life because the culture was so heavy with work and it was actually slowing down their economy, and they actually figured that out. That Microsoft said, we're only going to do 4 days a week, and what they saw was a 40% productivity gain. And then when the pandemic hit, people were already a little bit more used to not being in the office as much. They were actually able to increase that gain again when they're actually isolated at home. So there's plenty of those certain things. And then Unilever in New Zealand is working on doing this as well. There's another company, it's a estate planning company whose name is escaping me at the moment, did this in 2018, and they saw their productivity go up 20%. Even in the United States, let's pick on the United States for a second. In the state of Utah, they went to a 4-day work week. They saw all sorts of gains in their people's happiness. They reduced their bills, and people, once they got used to their government operating that way, didn't actually have any complaints that the government was only operating 4 days a week. Unfortunately, it got killed because a bill was proposed for the government to do that, and it got killed by the prior governor than they have now. But there's all sorts of examples where this is actually working. And then you start talking about that hybrid system. Some companies are able to do it because there are people that recognize that they're not personally as productive at home as they are in the office. That structure of the office helps them. So the companies that are doing that hybrid are actually winning when they're talking to individuals, understanding how they work, and putting in place the best system for the people to work instead of the system driving the work, if that makes sense.
So in radio, we were given the luxury of having home studios, I would say about 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. I mean, a long time ago. And it was a game changer. But you do lose, there's something about being in a live studio and doing a radio show from a studio than doing it from a home studio. There's no doubt about it. There's absolutely a big difference. But it also saved commute time, and for many stations, it really was a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're seeing that across the board now. The antithesis to that, right, with what's lost by going into an office or, in your example, into a radio station, is usually that more social aspect, which is extremely important, right? I mean, humans have 3 characteristics. 1, we want to survive. 2, we want to be social. And 3, we want to be right. And we can't take any of those really away from us.
Yes.
Otherwise, we lose ourselves. So that social aspect is very, very important. Building bonds does increase our productivity. Even going back to your analogy of where you used to work, being social is important.
Yeah, it really is. When we come back, we have to take a quick break. George Nagle is our guest today. George, give us the best website. I know that you're an author. You have some really strong feelings about creativity. We'll talk a little bit more about that. when we come back from break. And the best way people can find you is?
Just simply go to Ideation, Emporium.com, and all of my information is right there.
Miserable at work? Why? You don't have to be. That's right. George will tell you why when we come back from break. I'm Frankie Boyer. This is Biz Talk Radio. Welcome back. So do you think there's a significant savings? Do you think it would be a game changer? Would you like to work 4 days? Well, some of us may not be able to. And then there are those that can create the life around their schedule. Joining me today right here on Biz Talk Radio on the Frankie Boyer Show is George Nagle. George, creativity is like your middle name. You thrive on that. And your new book is out, Miserable at Work? Why? You don't have to be. So tell us a little bit about the Emporium, what you're doing, and why you wrote the book.
So the Emporium is about allowing people to rediscover the fact that we are all creative. And we do that through a series of different things to bring awareness and then teach people tools that are fun and simple that they can use that day and implement and actually see changes and just start to contribute to something that they find more meaningful and bring more happiness out. And when I started to think about that, the book almost wrote itself because what people find when they're implementing the tools and the techniques that we demonstrate with them. And when I say demonstrate, I mean, we literally roll up our sleeves. We show you the tools on your problems in real time, and people actually can tangibly have a change that day. They're no longer as sad. They're excited about coming back to work and embracing what they're doing because they've gained a new perspective.
So Albert Einstein, and this is from your website, imagination is more important than knowledge, but knowledge empowers imagination. Kind of like, leave it to Albert to give us that one, huh?
It's super powerful when you start to break it down, because we start with imagination. We start as a child with imagination. That's our playground, right? Everything's brand new, so we're experiencing, and as we gain experience as a child, we get to imagine more and more and more until at some point we start to reduce that and then we lose it. And then we become all about the knowledge and we forget the imagination part. They work very hand in hand, and they have to if we want to be ourselves and be expressive and just find more happiness.
You know, I love what you're saying, and I think it makes tremendous sense because when I worked at the now defunct Boston Phoenix, which was very similar to the Village Voice in New York City, here in Boston. And those of us that worked at the Boston Phoenix, fun was like such an important part of being there. And one of our wonderful colleagues passed away, and I was looking on Facebook at all the comments, and every one of them is, oh, I just loved working with Alan. He was so fun, and the trade department was just such an exciting, new, forward-thinking invention, and it went on and on and on. And you got from reading, even if you didn't know Alan, you got the essence of who he was, and the fact that he loved to laugh and that he loved to make people smile.
It's game changing, right? In the work environment,
yes,
when you have that type of colleague.
And years later, years later, and people are still making those comments about someone and a paper that's been defunct for years now. And I think it's so fascinating because where did that piece go, George? Where did that piece of having wonderful ways to be creative and enjoy yourself and unlock that place in you?
Yeah. The truth of it is we start to lose that as we enter into formal education. It's just the nature of 2 plus 2 isn't 22 anymore, right? It has to be 4. And the moment we start to apply restrictions, then we start to get into that mindset that life is going to be reduced, and then we always have people telling us what to do. And remember, I said that humans are 3 things, right? We want to survive, we're social, and we want to be right. And when people get into power and they want to be right, if you do it differently than they do, well, you're automatically wrong, and that just beats down our creativity. And the colleague that you're talking about was able to rise above that, and he had a lifelong impression on people. And that's the power, that's the magic that we capture at the Ideation Emporium of Creativity, is bringing that out in everybody again so that they can make their own happiness.
Right. So does it really matter what the work week is structured as long as you can bring those ingredients with you? And is that why people are leaving their jobs?
The work week structure, it really does truly depend on what you're doing, right? If you're a truck driver, you have to get things to the store because consumption happens all the time. If you're maybe on a manufacturing floor, there might be some more flexibility there from the standpoint of, when owners or bosses get engaged with the people that physically are doing something, people physically doing it probably have better ways to actually do it that are more time efficient. So there's some flexibility there. But the reduction in being able to work on something significant and be yourself and have some of that creativity and ownership is absolutely a reason that people are leaving, especially now with the Great Resignation, and a lot of people have already left. Now you're doing 10 times as much work and in the same amount of time, and people are just burnt out.
They're saying that people are regretting that they left. I've heard that from a few people. That, I'm just regretting that.
Yeah. There's about 20% of the population that is being very vocal about their regret in leaving. And almost all of them, when you ask them, what's your biggest regret, is they're talking about losing all of those connections. And then you say to them, well, why did you leave? And the answer comes back, well, this job offered more money. We as a species get so short-circuited by money. It's not even funny. And it does cause us to do things that often we regret later, like not taking the time to investigate and ask questions. The asking of questions for any job that you're applying to is extremely important, because most people forget that an interview is a two-way street. You're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And when you don't capitalize on that, chances are you may be putting yourself in a worse situation, maybe not monetarily, but socially and work hours wise, than you had been in before.
So we have to take a break. Thank you so much. This is so fascinating, George. Love conversations with you, and give us the website.
So it's ideationemporium.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to take a quick break and be right back. I'm Frankie Boyer. This is Biz Talk Radio. Stay tuned.